Hello, everybody. I am discussing about socialist perspective in Indian national freedom struggle, which is a topic in Indian government and politics, which is the section B of paper 1. This video is part of the series on the topic of various perspectives in Indian freedom struggle. I have already, discussed about liberal perspective and Dalit perspective, and now I am talking about socialist perspective. My, discussion on other perspectives are already there in separate videos, so you can see them. I am S.N. Chakraborty talking on behalf of Chakraborty's IS Academy. Socialist perspective in India's freedom struggle need not be equated with Marxian perspective of socialism. That has to be kept in mind. There are two different socialist ideas. One is socialism in broader meaning, and another one is Marxian class perspective. Many ancient societies grew with socialist ideas, meaning equality, freedom, and justice for all. The French Revolution, for example, based on liberty, equality, and fraternity, is considered as the beginning of modern liberal thoughts. In short, socialist idea argues for just and equal social order. Socialist thought in Indian freedom struggle was a product of the primary contradiction between the colonial rule and the rising aspirations of national freedom movement. This was supplemented by various struggles for right and freedom of the people elsewhere in the non-European societies like proletarian revolution in Russia, or nationalist struggles in Turkey, or anti-racism movement in some colonial countries in Africa, and also other movements in Asian countries, Asian colonies. In Indian freedom struggle, socialist perspective got manifested in two forms. One, theoretical discourse, and another is the formation of organizations and publications of journals, etc. More than a theoretical discourse, socialist thoughts in Indian freedom struggle emerged through public activities. Many of the frontline leaders certainly had contributed to socialist visions and programs, but that cannot be claimed to be very structured and systematic socialist thoughts. For example, that Gandhi was very much convinced that true socialism could be established by satyagraha alone. But then he was more involved in political activities, political movements, rather than developing a socialist theory on how that can work in Indian freedom struggle. Similarly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar advocated for a social system which ensures right-based relations between men and women and between caste and classes. Dr. Ambedkar was in favor of state socialism, and that is why we have seen that later on he included a lot of things in the constitution in the form of fundamental rights or directive principles of the state policy. Nehru developed a Fabian concept of socialism, and Nehru talked about equal opportunities for all in every aspect of life. Historian K.M. Panikar, in his book National and Left Movement in India, commented that to Nehru, socialism was a broad tendency and not a precise body of right belief, rigid belief. Socialism appeared to Nehru more as a philosophy of life. Okay. Now, in freedom struggles, people were involved in the movement. Okay, they were not theoreticians. But along with their movement, they also developed a vision, a perspective. And that is how a socialist perspective has come out. So therefore, you cannot expect a very, very scholarly, socialistic idea which has been developed in Europe. Ram Manohar Lohia, as another socialist leader, Contributions to socialist thought and actions are manifold. He wanted to free individual from ignorance, backwardness, and all kinds of superstitions and prejudices. He put maximum emphasis upon restoring the dignity and individuality of human being. Lohia highlighted the ideological problems of the socialist movement in India. And there he, talked about Marxism, talked about Gandhism, and tried to also see that how these two can be, combined somehow. These aside, there was a number of parties, with prefix socialist were formed in the country, like Socialist Party, Congress Socialist Party, and much later Praja Socialist Party, and many others. They also conveyed the message of socialism. These apart, there were Communist Party of India, which is definitely championed or tried to advocate Marxian concept of socialism, and there are, other left-leaning parties who forwarded a vision of classless socialist society. For example, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose formed Forward Bloc, which is a left-leaning but really not equivalent to a communist party. The Bihar Socialist Party was formed in 1934, in which Acharya Narendra Deva, which is a very important personality in socialist thought, was made the president, and Jayaprakash Narayan became the general secretary. Jayaprakash Narayan was initially a Marxist, and then he became a socialist, and also later on he became a Gandhian. Soon, at the Bombay session of the Indian National Congress in the same year, in the same year of 1934, an All India Congress Socialist Party was formed under the stewardship of Acharya Narendra Deva. Within the broader fold of Congress, they did not leave Congress. They remained within Congress but promoted a socialist idea. They kept distance from Gandhi and also from the strong sectarian attitude of the Communist Party of India. So they, created a more broader, aspect, but at the same time kept a very, very clear socialist perspective in their programming. It advocated decentralized socialism in which cooperatives, trade unions, independent farmers, and local authorities would hold a substantial share of the economic power. That is what they wanted. It started advocating for an equitable social order and land reforms. And that is what was missing in Gandhi, and automatically it was missing in the Congress mainstream. Now, socialists were never a homogeneous group. While some members in CSP advocated for armed struggle even, other group members such as Yusuf Meherali, Jayaprakash Narayan, Baswan Singh, they insisted for ahimsa or non-violence resistance. So that way they adopted Gandhian path but kept a socialist perspective. Nehru, from Fabian perspective, made an attempt to combine nationalism with Marxism, but he was also against a violent revolution. Now, rift between socialists and the more conservative sections of the Congress eventually widened. As the socialists like Jayaprakash Narayan, Narendra Deva, Ashok Mehta, Dr. R.M. Lohia, Minu Masani, they championed the cause of the workers and the peasants, and put their weight behind the policies like common ownership of natural resources, land reforms, workers' rights. Automatically the rift between the conservative sections within Congress and socialists widened. Such an approach came in confrontation with the landlords, princes, and the capitalists who constitute a considerable chunk within the leadership of the Congress party. Socialists like Acharya Narendra Deva advocated for tenant rights against landlords and thus promoted class struggle at the village level. And that is why he was also very close, peasant movements during the freedom movement. Gandhi, anyway, was nowhere as a socialist, but he was neither cannot say he was absolutely against socialist thought. But he had done more than any other individual to mobilize the peasantry, because his mass, mobilization also involved, mobilization of the peasantry, and had effected a psychological transformation in the Indian parties with a more advanced ideology, functioned largely on the ground. Socialist perspective then onward, that after this Congress Socialist Party came into being, became an integral part of the independence movement. Though, Dr. Ambedkar never claimed to be a socialist. Even if we really examine, we'll find that it would be incorrect to say that his social justice concept was devoid of any socialist view or social reconstruction. One of the limitations of socialist perspective is that it had never been a homogeneous concept. That is the main problem. Hence, socialist perspective has failed to penetrate into the psyche of the masses, and that is where Gandhi took the advantage. He had a greater connection with the masses. Till independence, influence of liberal thoughts of Gandhi over the independence movement remained unchallenged. At the Nasik session of the Congress, finally, in 1948, the socialists walked out of Congress, those who were the initiators of Congress Socialist Party. The Congress Socialist Party became Socialist Party. Karpuri Thakur organized the Socialist Party in almost all districts of Bihar. It had a very good base in Bihar. And the party developed socialist thoughts based on unequal social and economic environment in India. Ashok Mehta, Ram Manohar Lohia initiated the merging, finally, of the Kishan Mazdoor Praja Party and the Socialist Party to form a new outfit, and that is called the Praja Socialist Party. So thank you. This is in brief about the socialist perspective during the freedom struggle.